What if the magazine covers from 1988 were not predictions but memos? What if that image of a phoenix rising to a single currency was a blueprint, quietly circulated among bankers, central banks, and the architects of global liquidity? What if your paycheck, your savings, and the price on your grocery shelf are now small gears in a machine designed to replace national money with programmable credit? What if the crisis they keep fixing is the method they use to take control? Where are you watching from? Drop your city below, because this story isn't local. It's global. It touches every bank account, every welfare check, every pension fund. Hit subscribe for the unfiltered truth. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you'll understand exactly how a single magazine cover, an evolving lattice of central bank tools, and decades of efficiency have brought us to the edge of a system that can turn money into a permissioned utility. Tonight, we trace the thread from printed prophecy to programmable money and expose the engine beneath it. We will show how a quiet architecture built via swaps, settlement layers, and tokenized reserves can make the idea of a one-world currency less a theory and more a functioning infrastructure. This is not hypothetical. It is happening now. To understand today, we must read history as a sequence of recurring solutions for the same problem: how to finance power without giving up control. In the ancient world, kings didn't rely on consensus. They controlled coinage. The ruler's stamp on metal made coins acceptable, and that acceptance was a tax on loyalty. Sound familiar? Babylon recorded loans on clay tablets, grain, silver. People pledged to temples and nobles. There were jubilee resets to prevent the system from starving itself, but the pattern remained: debt as governance. Sound familiar? Rome's denarius was debased slowly by emperors needing war finance. Inflation, social unrest, and the concentration of wealth followed. Sound familiar? In the Renaissance, merchant banks Medici, Fugger invented letters of credit. War financing turned private wealth into public leverage. Venice's bond market funded fleets. States learned they could sell future taxes for immediate power. Sound familiar yet? By 1694, the Bank of England institutionalized a model that would be repeated everywhere: private capital lending to the state in return for the right to create credit. For the first time, a nation's finances were codependent with private balance sheets. That model spread, mutated, and became the modern central bank. America's experiment contained both resistance and adoption. Jefferson warned, if we allow private banks to control the issue of our currency, we will lose our property. Hamilton built the machinery anyway. The irony: the revolution kicked the crown out of politics but retained its financial system. Fast forward to the 20th century. 1913 saw the Federal Reserve's creation. The Fed was pitched as stability. It soon became a transmission belt between private credit and public solvency. 1971 saw Nixon and the dollar's gold blink. Suddenly, money was not metal, it was trust and ledger entries. A sovereign's currency became abstractions to be managed, not solid assets to be defended. Then, in January 1988, The Economist published the image, a phoenix, and the headline, "Get ready for a world currency." To many readers, it was an intellectual curiosity. To technocrats and monetary bureaucrats, it was a framing device. It captured an idea already germinating, that the economic logic of globalization might be more efficient if currencies converged toward a common unit or interoperable system. Sound familiar? The late 20th and early 21st centuries then gave us the mechanisms to execute that logic. Rapid electronic settlement, global banking networks, SWIFT, the explosive growth of cross-border portfolio flows, and crucially, the willingness of central banks to coordinate liquidity across borders through swap lines. Sound familiar? Each crisis, 1998, 2008, 2020, was framed as a shock to manage. Yet each fix created more centralized tools: swap lines, emergency facilities, permanent backstops. When central banks lend to each other, national boundaries blur. When a central bank promises liquidity to world markets, it acts as more than a national authority. It acts like a node in a global system. That system's architecture now contains all the pieces the Economist's cover imagined: a common accounting unit, SDRs and baskets, global settlement rails, interoperable CBDC projects and BIS experiments, and a narrative of efficiency to justify them. Sound familiar yet? This is the slow arc of transfer. From coin impressions on metal, to entries on clay, to private letters of credit, to national central bank policies, to a global ledger controlled by technocrats. Each step promised stability and efficiency. Each step consolidated power. Now the twist. This isn't just a story of ideas becoming policy. It's a story of an engineered migration, intentional, coordinated, and profitable. The primary mechanism pushing us toward a single interoperable monetary fabric is not the headline-grabbing one-currency rhetoric. It's the global liquidity web, an integrated set of swap lines, cross-border settlement pilots, tokenized reserve initiatives, and institutional frameworks designed to make national currencies fungible at machine speed. Here's how it works at a glance. 1. Swap lines. Central banks lend each other liquidity in their currencies. Ostensibly temporary, operationally persistent. 2. Settlement hubs. Institutions like the BIS provide cross-central bank platforms to clear and net obligations across jurisdictions. 3. Tokenized reserves. IMF SDRs and central bank reserves are being prototyped as tokenized assets, programmable, divisible, and transferable instantly. 4. CBDC rails. Central bank digital currencies plug retail and wholesale systems into the settlement web, enabling instant cross-border value transfer. This is not merely technical progress. It is political engineering. When liquidity flows are normalized, national monetary policy becomes less about domestic priorities and more about maintaining network stability. Who writes the rules of the network gains leverage. And now the real revelation, the one that ties the Economist cover to today's pilots and pilots to tomorrow's policy. An institution quietly coordinating the move. You won't believe the name. It's not a single oligarch nor a cabinet minister. It's an architecture stewarded by a network of central banks and supranational bodies, the BIS, the IMF, and a handful of major central banks. Their meetings, projects, and experimental platforms are the receipts of a plan that's been quietly executed for decades. The receipt is wilder than you think. The core architecture, how the global liquidity web works. Node layer. National central banks and major commercial banks are nodes. They maintain ledgers, reserve accounts, and credit lines. Clearing layer. Settlement platforms like current, RTGS systems, SWIFT, future. This lead bridges clear obligations. Netting reduces gross exposures. Net settlement requires a base asset. Reserve layer, historically gold, then dollar reserves, now a mix of national reserves, IMF SDRs, and tokenized assets. Interface layer, retail banks, payment providers, and CBDC wallets that convert user transactions into ledger entries on the clearing layer. When an emergency hits, the web does two things. It liquefies, injects credit across nodes instantly, and repairs. Reallocates reserve claims to maintain confidence. The convenience of this network is its danger. It centralizes response and concentrates discretion. 5 shocking numbers. 1. $7.5 trillion day approximate global FX turnover, like pre-pandemic benchmark, the bloodstream of cross-border liquidity. 2,330 trillion rough size of global debt markets, like public and private, 4 times. Global GBA load-bearing framework for global finance. 316 trillion aggregated emergency liquidity and swap arrangements, disclosed across crises, like cumulative magnitudes through different interventions. 4. 134 countries, number exploring or piloting CBDC schemes, like representing the majority of global GDP. 5. 80% by 2030 BIS. Industry roadmaps projecting wide CBDC adoption and interoperable rails like this figure is the policy target many pilots aim for. These numbers make a pattern clear. The system is global, leveraged, and digital. How a routine cross-border transfer becomes a control point. Imagine Alice in country A buying a product from Bob in country B. Today, that cross-border payment goes through a chain. Alice's bank to domestic RTGs, to correspondent bank to foreign RTGs to Bob's bank. Each step incurs time, fees, and risk buffers. Under the web, Alice's CBDC wallet instructs instantaneous settlement on a BIS-supervised bridge. The transaction clears through tokenized reserves. The central bank's ledgers net exposures in real time. If the bridge detects a policy breach, perhaps sanctions, or non-compliance flagged by analytics, it can apply a conditional rule. Allow the transfer, but only if Bob's account meets criteria. Or delay until intervention. Programmable money equals programmable gates. That's the architecture. Now the incentives. Who profits and how? Private asset managers and market makers profit from widened markets, reduced settlement friction, and new fee layers. Large commercial banks gain privileged access to liquidity corridors and custody roles for tokenized reserves. Technology providers like consortiums of cloud, fintech, and blockchain firms monetize rails, analytics, and identity services. Central banks gain operational efficiency and policy tools, but also cede discretion to a network consensus that may not reflect domestic priorities. In short, the new architecture monetizes immediacy. Faster settlement produces new rent streams. Those rents accumulate at the bridgeheads, the institutions controlling the settlement fabric. Each crisis introduces moral hazard. Institutions expect rescue, leverage accordingly, and innovate opaque instruments. The web institutionalizes rescue pathways, a permanent safety net. That safety net reduces market discipline and amplifies concentration. Parasitic finance feeds on this arrangement. Derivative overlays, repo chains, shadow banks now digitally encoded within settlement smart contracts. When they fail, the net mitigates the blow, but the rescue socializes loss and privatizes gain. Special drawing rights, SDRs, are a textbook example of a unit of account made fungible. The IMF's $650 billion SDR allocation in 2021 is modern precedent, a supranational claim converted to liquid currency. Tokenized SDRs represent each SDR as a digital token, transferable on BIS bridges, programmable for conditional usage. Now you have a multiplex reserve unit that central banks and large institutions can use as base money. When tokenized reserves become usable for real settlement, national currencies become peripheral interfaces, local wrappers for global base money. The euro is the clearest historical step toward a shared currency, multiple nations surrendering monetary space for deeper integration. The lessons are stark. Political sovereignty was traded for price stability and capital integration. Disparate fiscal policies met a uniform monetary policy set in Frankfurt. Fiscal stress transmitted across borders swiftly. The global web mirrors this, but substitutes technocratic coordination for political union. The price may be similar: loss of independent monetary tools in exchange for systemic stability. Programmable money makes policy granular. You can incentivize certain purchases, tax transactions in real time, or tie benefits to conduct like carbon allowances, social allocations. That can be progressive or coercive. When identity is linked to wallets, behavioral signals are monetized and policed. A misstep like protest participation flagged, Disinformation markers that could move you from a gold tier to a restricted tier. This is not fiction. Pilot designs in multiple jurisdictions include conditional features. The technical lock happens when global settlement standards are adopted, identical messaging schemas, shared cryptographic standards, and interoperable legal frameworks. At that point, you can reroute liquidity across borders without national clearance. That is the precise moment when a global unit becomes operationally dominant. This is no longer about theory. The 1988 cover did not condemn a dream. It framed a trajectory that has been engineered, step by careful step. Imagine the next crisis. Not a theatrical crash replay, but a surgical update. A pause in settlement rails while an algorithmic fix reroutes reserves. No lines at banks. No televised bailouts. A system update and a policy change globally synchronized. Imagine a world where your monthly income is denominated in programmable credits that expire, are earmarked, or require compliance checks to be used. Imagine your access toggled for public safety. Imagine dissent priced out of existence. We can debate the efficiencies, but efficiency is also controlled with prettier packaging. Faster settlement removes friction, and friction is often the last line of defense for individual sovereignty. So what do? We ask questions. We demand transparency on pilot rules. We insist on democratic oversight over standards held at technocratic institutions. We refuse the language that says efficiency cannot be regulated. Share this video. Comment where you're watching from. Tell us if your central bank has a CBDC pilot and what transparency measures exist. Subscribe for more hard-nosed records of the systems that shape your money. Because when the ledgers start to matter more than the laws, the fight for democracy will be coded into bytes. Maybe the real question isn't what's next, but who's writing it.